Just wait here for it to connect.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know
That
what
was
happened
so weird. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I didn't like that you were going to tell us your favorite thing about homeschool, your favorite
Okay.
subject to
Yeah.
teach.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's changed. When I first started, it was history because it was just we read a lot of books, we did a lot of like crafts, and
Yeah.
we watched movies, and that was just my favorite. But over time, I actually think I enjoy teaching math to my
Okay.
younger kids, not my high school
Well,
kids.
this will
I
be perfect then.
don't. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Those two would probably be what I enjoy teaching the most right now.
Good. Well, then you are, like I said, you are the perfect person for this. So, okay, let's dive in. I'm going to talk a little bit about just kind of like an introduction. And what's going to happen is Chantel's going to interrupt me if I'm telling you guys wrong. Okay. Because I'm still learning so much of this. Like I said, I'm not a pro with math, but I
I'm not
am
an
pretty
expert
good at
either.
gathering information and sharing it. And that's what I really like to do. And so I'm going to be referring to a couple of things today. And there's some resources that I can share with you guys. What I'll do when I post this live, I should be able to save it onto my feed after. And after a few minutes, I'll get it up and running, but I'll set up an auto link so that you guys can get these resources. And let me show you a couple of things that I'm going to share with you guys. There's going to be this math track PDF. This comes from The Good and the Beautiful. We're going to be talking about this, but I'm going to be referencing it. And then Chantel and I put together a list of some high school and middle school curriculum that we might I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that it might be good to research to see what might be the best fit for your families. Okay, so just comment, probably link if you're watching this later, so it's on the post, and then these will come to you, as well as a link for Cathy Duffy reviews. It's so good. I'm gonna share a little bit about that too. Okay, so what we're going to do to kind of get all on the same page first is I'm going to zoom out really broad and talk a little bit about why are we even talking about math tracks with high school and middle school years. I feel like that this is a time where moms need a lot of support, and so let's zoom out. And just to share my own experience, I started kind of researching this around 5th grade, and sometimes when I tell people that, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so early. And first, let me say, you have plenty of time. So if you're watching this and your child's in 10th grade and you've never thought anything about it, totally fine. But my personality is just always thinking ahead. So I started around 5th grade to kind of see like what are we aiming toward? Like, do I even want to keep doing this? And if so, I just kind of felt really blind. Like since I didn't homeschool like Chantel through when I was younger, you don't have like insight into what a future looks like. And so I was like, I just need to have some kind of idea of what direction I'm headed in our homeschool, as well as with our math, right? Because math is kind of a big subject. So when we're talking about these secondary school years, I like to basically say, just make it really simple and say there's kind of two paths that you can do as you're going into middle school and high school. You can kind of follow a traditional path, or you can follow an untraditional path. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about probably a traditional path because both Chantel and I lean that way. But that doesn't mean that there isn't other ways to do this, and that there can be kind of an untraditional method. Maybe untraditional might look like your family takes a year off and you're traveling, and so you just don't do math for a year. And so when we're talking about this is about a 7th or 8th or 9th grade level or age, maybe you didn't do that. And so you're going to come up with a different way to reach your goals, right? Maybe you want to do more of like an applied math where you're focusing on like financial literacy for a little while. Sometimes people do that, I think, in conjunction with their math, their kind of normal math, traditional math paths. But maybe that's really important to your family. Maybe you guys are big entrepreneurs, and so placing that above an algebra course is really important to you. So we're not going to lean into those things, but those things are certainly options, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And I think they're good options.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But just so that everybody's on the same page, this is kind of a little bit more traditional.
Yeah.
That we're talking about. Okay. So traditional paths are more of like a leveled approach to math. So for example, if we, before we learn division, it's really helpful to understand multiplication, right? Before multiplication, you have to understand addition and subtraction. So as we're getting into these secondary levels, we're going to be kind of looking at that same pathway. So traditionally, it goes pre-algebra after like a grade 6 or a level 6 math, right? You have pre-algebra, and then you have algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. Now this method is called like an AGA model, and that can be kind of like a traditional name for it. But in recent years, too, they have more integrated approaches, and they might call those integrated approaches like integrative math, or they may call it a secondary math. And it's the idea that you teach geometry integrated with algebra. And that's also popular. In fact,
Yeah.
here in the state of Utah, our public schools are actually in like debate of which model is the best approach, right? So, and there are some curriculums that in the homeschool world that have more integrated approach. A lot of them you'll see use the geometry algebra 2 model or like in their books. And so, but if you're researching and looking into math, you'll want to kind of be familiar with integrative or secondary math as well, because those terms can kind of be interchangeable, and you might see curriculum that's named that way.
Mhm.
And then after that, there is a statistics and pre-calculus and calculus. Now, those are sometimes taken in high school, sometimes more for like STEM fields or people that are really excited about math.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're preparatory for college, but they're not necessarily needed to graduate. Now, again, this probably depends on the state. And if we're looking kind of with the end in mind, we're looking at like what transcripts require in your state to graduate high school. So many states require the algebra, geometry, algebra 2, but it definitely can fluctuate all over the states. And I don't know, that's what it is here in Utah. I don't know, is that what yours is, Chantel?
We don't actually really have, for homeschool, we don't really have graduation requirements, but for the public school, I think the last one they require is Algebra 2.
Okay, yeah.
So Algebra
Yeah, the
1,
homeschool transcripts, yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes this works for just high school graduation, but sometimes you also need these as part of your transcript to get as like a prerequisite for moving into college. But most colleges
Yeah.
I've found, I mean, there's always so many different paths that you can take, right? Like you can also, I'm like, I've thought a lot about this because I'm like, well, there's a lot of people who go back to college later and they just have to. I was like, nobody has remembered algebra if you haven't been in school for 25 years, right? So there
Yeah.
are even classes in if you are college bound, and of course that's a path, not the path, right? But if you have that you can certainly start to take some of these. I think a lot of the times call it like a developmental math in early college classes to kind of refresh. But if you have somebody that's maybe looking for to doing an SAT or an ACT, it's named different things, different states, different colleges, different schools, or different jobs. You know, those are some of these things that you kind of want to be looking out, you know, in having an idea of where you're headed, right? Does that sound right,
Yeah.
Chantel? Are we on the right same track
Yeah,
here?
I think so. I mean, a lot of it really just depends on the college they're going to go to. Like some of my kids did college, community college, and so when they transferred to a 4-year college, it was they went in as a transfer student, not necessarily a freshman. So it just kind of depends on that too. But yeah, for totally, that's the traditional approach, I think.
Yeah, good. And we're going to hear a lot from Chantel on her different paths that she's kind of done with some of her older kids. So we're gonna dive into that. So okay, one of the things that I think sometimes surprises people, and this is one of the reasons that has prompted this conversation, is if you have already been kind of on a traditional math track and done like K through 5 or K through 6 math, a lot of the times sixth grade is kind of like a pivot point right after sixth grade. And depending on what route you kind of choose to go is going to be largely dependent probably on your child and also the years that you've kind of spent prior preparing maybe for this moment. But you can skip a seventh grade math class. And thinking back, I was like, I vaguely remember this in my own education. And when my husband and I were talking about it, he's like, yeah, I skipped it. And I was like, oh, I didn't. I definitely knew I needed more math practice. I am the worst at math. And so I think it can be kind of a surprise that people are just kind of like moving through their levels of math. And then they're like, oh, we just go from level 6 to level 7. So we're going to talk about what scenarios do we skip, grade 7 or level 7 math. And that's usually if you have a child that has done really well in math, that
Yeah.
is like, it's like their favorite subject, or they're really passionate about it and they're strong in math. Then in their 7th grade year, they can go into a pre-algebra course. Now, again, this is going to fluctuate all over the board. Some people have probably not even
Mhm.
thought about this at the time, but it is an option. And again, this is one of the reasons what prompted this discussion is because we use the good and the beautiful curriculum. And that is
Mhm.
something that is pretty, it's on their website and talks about, and that I'm going to point you guys to that direction, is that if you're coming off of a level 6 curriculum with them and your child is really strong in math, you can go into pre-algebra. But level 7 is there to be like an extra year of practice of setting
Yeah.
foundations, which can be really, really beneficial if your child needs that. You don't want to be pushing them along and putting them into a harder path than necessary, right? We want to meet our children. The best
Mhm.
thing I always say is that we can meet our children right where they're at and then help them just grow to the next level, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes we tend to look at the academic, but I think maturity plays a big part in it too.
Ooh, so good.
Because, maybe academically your child is ready to go to pre-algebra, but maturity wise, you're like, we need another year to grow up a little bit.
Yeah. Chantel, what would you say are some signs that your child is ready or not ready for something like that?
I think if they are doing their math well, like, and I don't mean score, I mean they get in and they want to do it, but if they're fighting you on it, like you're not going to be able to get very far in a pre-algebra
Yes.
course.
Yes.
So I
I would
think that's
say,
one thing.
yeah, and like kind of their ability to do work independently, right? Like,
Right.
have they gained the independent skills? We're also going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. I'm interested in hearing a lot more from Chantel about, what that has looked like in her home at different stages and phases with different kids. And I know already based on my experience, I can tell, yeah, maturity is a big part of it. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you guys this track. And like I said, we kind of talked about this, but this comes from The Good and the Beautiful. And you guys probably aren't going to be able to see this super well. So like I said, if you comment after this video, I'll set up an auto link so I can send it to you. But basically, it says on here, I really like the way that this is written out
Yeah.
because it gives you a really good visual of what to expect over the years. So, like, for example, you would be considered on a math track that's advanced if your child's taking pre-algebra in 6th grade, which I absolutely agree with. That's an early age to be doing an advanced, getting into pre-algebra, right? But
Yeah.
maybe some kids, especially homeschool, sometimes they just advance a little bit quicker. We have more time, and if there's a
Mm-hmm.
child that's really passionate or math minded, it's a good fit for them to be moving a little bit quicker. And that would give them up into their like sophomore year of high school, like trigonometry or pre-calculus, calculus, or AP classes in their high school years. So this is also really good. Like if you have a math-minded child, you're getting a bunch of college credit level in high school, right? And again, this will probably be for kids who are more likely to go into like a STEM field or something like that, right? Or mathematics, obviously.
Yeah.
Typical paths, though, there's two paths that are typical here. Is 6th grade would be like a level 6 math, and then either going into 7th grade level math or a pre-algebra math, which gives you, depending on which option you go, again, can kind of give you a couple different options when you get into high school. So sometimes I really like to point this out because um, we kind of sometimes think like traditionally we start counting, credits in 9th grade for high school, but really in homeschool, you can start counting those credits much earlier, right? We can look at them and say, oh, they're doing an algebra course in their 7th, 8th grade years. That can go onto their transcript, right? So we're already preparing that instead of just thinking of it like a 9th grade level, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I love seeing that visual. But again, I really want to also emphasize that there's a lot of flexibility here, right? When we see kind of these levels, again, more traditional, but we also, I see families that are homeschooling through summer, homeschooling more days a week. We
Mhm.
usually only do like a 4-day school week, sometimes 3 weeks if we have a lot going on. So it could totally depend, and maybe there's some life changes or other interests of the child, and so you can definitely make it work. I took a class last year on homeschooling through high school, and one of the things that just has stuck out to me over and over again in hearing the course in the class was that there's so many different ways to make it work. Like if you are again like watching this in ninth or 10th and 11th grade and you're like panicking and you're like, oh my gosh, we didn't do algebra in 7th grade or 8th grade, and that's not that. There's just so many different options, and hopefully as we share some experiences you guys will see that. But I really want to like make sure that we emphasize, so emphasize that here. Chantel, do you have anything to add before we kind of move on to hearing some experiences?
I think you pretty much covered it. I think it's just so kid dependent, and don't worry, like if you've missed that window, like you said, I think there's plenty of time to make things work.
Yeah, very good.
But
Okay, awesome. This is where I just think it's so helpful to hear from other moms' experiences. So, I like to call them like mentor moms, right? Where I heard that term in from another class that I took, and I was like, that's exactly what this is. So, I feel like I said, Chantel has some really great experience, and so I have some questions to kind of prompt and ask her to share those experiences. Anytime I share my experience, and if you guys have talked to me in my DMs before, I always say this: is it's just take what serves you and leave the rest, because every family is so unique, every child's situation is so different, and so maybe it's just one little piece. Try to avoid comparing exactly, like I should be doing exactly what Cassie or exactly what Chantel did. Just take the parts that serve you, and hopefully we can answer, maybe provide some answers to prayers if somebody's searching for answers, but also just be able to share experience so that we can learn from them. So Chantel, I would love it if you basically just give us a good rundown of what it looks like when you graduated your kids in regards to math. What kind of things were you doing with them? What kind of path did they take? Were they the same? Are all your kids on the same level? Just give us kind of a broad view of what it looks like.
okay, yeah. So for my oldest, it was very more traditional. That's just always kind of been him. He just kind of wanted to follow that path. And I think when we started, my husband and I just decided that was kind of the route we wanted to go for not really any reason. That's just what we decided. And for him, he was very traditional. He got up to, I think, pre-calculus because we used Saxon, and it was their book is advanced mathematics. I think it's pre-calculus. And then he went into community college classes and kind of went on from there to college. For my next one, he did Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and then he loved geometry so much because it was integrated into his Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 course that he just wanted a course dedicated to geometry. And I was like, you know what? You liked it. Let's do it. Let's give you a year of just geometry. And so he did that. And then my third one, who's almost 17, is doing a tech school program. So he did Algebra 1 and then is doing whatever integrated math they have in that course. So we've kind of done traditional up to probably about 16 or 17 is kind of when my boys have given me more, hey mom, we want to do this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm willing to listen. So that's kind of how we did math for them through graduation. And I think I'll probably do the same thing with my next kiddos. I would like them to finish Algebra 2, but we'll see. um,
Okay, awesome. Okay, you touched a little bit on when they came to you. So what did math look like for you in kind of those middle school years? How much were you helping? What direction were you going? When did they start to become more independent? How did you help them navigate and direct those years? It's probably a little different with every child.
yeah, I think it is. But I also think that those are the years that can be kind of hard because math is
Mm-hmm.
no longer just quite as fun. some companies like the Good and the Beautiful try to put in fun things, but it's still just not always that fun because the problems are 5, 3, 4, however many steps. So I think the biggest thing that I did for them, and I can is consistency. I know you don't like this, but we're doing it anyways.
Okay, yeah, that's really good to hear.
And it's hard because the hormones are starting to kick in, and I don't. Anyways, I start getting more attitudes and more things like that. But just being consistent, I do try to have them be as independent as I possibly can. Because while I enjoy teaching math in the elementary years, once it starts getting middle school and high school, I'm just not able to help them as much. Partly because I have other kids, and partly because I don't know it. And so I'm like, I can help you to a point, but we're going to have to work together. So middle school years is just really getting firm for us in patterns of them just sitting down to do it on their own. And then they come to me for help. And then I kind of check when they're done because sometimes they say they're fine. And I'm like, well, maybe not. Let's focus on this a little more. So middle school is that. And then by high school, they're usually pretty independent. They're able to do a lot of it on their own. They're in algebra, and that is kind of hard. And so the system I've worked out is they come to me when they have a problem. And I can't answer it. I don't know how to do it. But we go to Google. We go to other videos, and we'll work it out. I can't tell you how many times they'll be explaining a problem to me, either why the book is wrong or they don't know how to do it.
I'm laughing because I know this is all too familiar in our home.
Yes. And I'm like, okay. And they'll be like explaining it to me. Then they'll go, oh, wait, I know what I did. And then they'll go and like fix it. But my role once high school comes, the way that I've kind of done it is I really become more of a mentor. I'm like, hey, we're going to do this. Kind of what path you want to take up to a certain point is up to you, but we're doing it. How can I help you? And that's kind of high school. That's where we're at. Middle school is when I'm really just firming up those patterns, those habits, those.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it looked like for us. For us, the Good and Beautiful didn't have math out for my older 3. And so we used a variety of different resources. We finally settled on Saxon, and that's just what we used, just because that's what I used.
So did you use Saxon with all of them then?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And what supplements to Saxon have you used? There was a lot of questions about this. I know that there's a lot out there, and I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge because you've tried them. So give us some rundown on them and what you've used and what you guys have liked. And again, probably dependent on the child.
Yeah, we have used some resources. We actually started with a one resource that I was going to talk about, but I don't think that it's usable anymore. For my oldest, I didn't know about a lot of resources, and I found one on Virtual Homeschool Group. They had like a free at your own pace program where they did videos and grading. And so he did that actually through Algebra 2, but I just looked at their website and it doesn't look like it's active anymore. No, he did it through Algebra 1, sorry. And then I found Art Reed for Saxon. My kids actually love his videos. He's just a teacher at the board, and he teaches it. And then I found my math assistant, and I kind of stuck with that because it had the grading, even though the videos weren't quite like, they like them, but they just liked Art Reed better. Like, I don't know. That was just their preference to see a person and not just the board. But we kind of stuck with my math assistant because it goes all the way through advanced mathematics in Saxon, and it had the grading. So we used that. I also know that Saxon has teaching videos where they actually walk you through every single problem, like everything, and you just watch it, but they're kind of long because they walk you through. So it's like a video solutions manual, basically.
Right.
And then there's Nicole, the math lady. There's tons of free videos on YouTube as well that we've used at various times. So yeah, there's a lot for Saxon for sure.
Okay, I want to circle back to this because I think it's really important because I feel like this is probably what's happened in our home as well is when it kind of start reaches a point where you can't like I can't just like I'm not as fluent in these math levels and so I would like have to study it to figure it out. So your process has been when your child faces a challenge or is struggling, you turn to outside resources to help them find the answers, and you're kind of mentoring them in that process to how to search
Yes,
through finding that option. And I think this is applicable to any math that you use. We're talking in the
for
context of
sure.
Saxon, but it's any type of video or extra resource that we can kind of pull in to support them. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed with my boys when they started college classes, like that was the thing that helped them the most is knowing how to find the answers that maybe their
Right.
professor didn't give them. So
Yeah.
yeah, my role was just like, hey, let's figure out what this answer is. I can't give it to you because I don't know it.
Yeah.
But let's see if we can figure it out. That
Right.
is one reason for me, and it's different for everybody, and there's so many resources out there. But for me, since I wasn't as fluent in the high school math, I wanted to choose a very well known and well used program because I was able to get help like in a Facebook group or things like that.
Yes.
So
Yep.
I think it
Yeah.
depends how confident you are in teaching the higher levels of math as to what you're going to use. But for me, that helped me be confident.
Right. Yeah. That's the same reason why we kind of pivoted to Saxon too. And I'll share a little bit more about that as well in our experience. But I find that it's something that's like popular and tried and true. It's just a little easier to find those resources to help support it. And
Yeah,
Saxon is pretty well known in these upper years.
yeah.
Um, okay, a couple of other things I wanted you to speak to is there anything that you kind of now in hindsight wish you would have done differently?
Um, I think my biggest math regret, and it actually stems in elementary school, was with my older boys. I didn't pick a very good for the teacher math program. Like it didn't, I just picked various workbooks or this and that when they were very young, and it didn't hold my hand as a teacher. So then when I got to the middle school years with my oldest kids, I really felt lost. I was like, I couldn't even help you with elementary. How am I going to do this harder math? So I think that would be my biggest regret is that I just didn't pick something that held my hand, I suppose. I don't
Yeah.
know. When the
Probably
good and the
sounds like maybe
beautiful,
lacking some foundations, like
yeah,
kind of more,
for
a little
sure.
bit more progressive that's structured a little bit. It was just probably more like supplemental or practice and maybe
Yeah,
a
just
little
kind
bit
of,
more structure would have helped.
yeah, something to teach me kind of the steps. So when the good and the beautiful released their elementary math, that's when I finally was like, oh, this isn't that hard. I can do
Yeah.
this. And so that would be my biggest regret is just not using something that helped me so much. And as for the high school years, I'm pretty happy with how we did things. Just,
Yeah.
I think a big thing is just kind of realizing that there's not going to be a perfect program out there, and you need to find something that you are comfortable with that can help you, and then you just kind of stick with it. And I finally got to that point with my oldest. I was like, I know you don't, because he didn't really necessarily love Saxon. I'll be honest, it can take a little while when you get up into algebra. He was
Yeah.
like an hour and a half on his problems. And he was like, I don't love this. And I'm like, I know you don't love this, but it is teaching you really good, and we're just going to stick with it from here on out. And he's like, okay. And just having that decision made that we're not going to switch every year, he was like, I don't know, it made him feel better, even though he didn't love it. And then later he told me, I'm really happy you did that.
Being
So
consistent.
yeah,
Yep.
just finally there comes a point where you just have to pick something and just make it work, I think is
Yeah.
probably my biggest regret is just finding something and making it work at some point.
Yeah, I think that it would be super hard, especially in the older years, to kind of be hopping curriculums because
Yeah.
there's just so many different algebraic equations that you're like working through. And I think it's helpful. But I'd love to hear maybe if somebody's had a different experience in the comments, like, hey, we switched around and it worked for us. I think that's great. Like share those experiences. But I think for me, especially when it's come to math, I've tried really hard to just stick with one route so that I wouldn't have to like lose time or money or curriculum hop and then like lose certain foundational skills or things because one book we did this a little bit in our elementary years earlier this year, and I'm like I noticed that I feel like if you stuck with one curriculum over a number of years, you get those concepts, but sometimes when you switch, maybe they covered it in level 2 and you're on level 3 and your level 3 was
Yeah.
different, and so there's just like some missing things that I'm like, wait a minute, this we talked about this here, and if I had just been with them the whole time, I think I would have got it. But kind of hopping around, you can kind of miss some of those things. So I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to look at, obviously a number of things when we're hopping curriculum and changing things for kids. But I think I really appreciate your advice and the idea that, sometimes we just have to kind of keep going, especially as we get older. I feel like that's something we're kind of currently going through, is settling for sure.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think that there is value in switching. Like my one son wanted just geometry after doing, Saxon Algebra 1 and 2. And I was like, well, you've kind of hit all the algebra concepts. Yeah, I think a year of geometry, it's not really a year off. It's just a year different. Like I think there's points in the high school where it's okay to switch as long as they've like you don't want to switch halfway through geometry, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it can kind of get challenging. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely valid reasons for doing it, but I think if you can try not to, it's more helpful.
Right. One thing I know that like and this is just the way that I look at it when I'm either picking out curriculum or if I have to switch curriculum, these are kind of the three things that I like to look at. And if you've followed me, and I've shared this before, especially on my shoulder or on my stories, but I like to look at three things. And one is, what is the academic thoroughness of a program or a curriculum, right? Those are the things that I'm kind of looking at when I'm researching and saying, is this covering what I want? Will this help me get to my goals? Do I feel like this is solid? Is it going to best support my child in their academic growth, right? But then just equally as important that is, what's my relationship with the curriculum? Is it something that I feel like I can use? Kind of
Wow.
like you touched on, is,
Yeah,
was this
that's a
helping
huge
me hold
one.
my hand? Was it a good guide for me? I've used some curriculums where I'm just like, wow, I cannot, like, this isn't organized how my brain is organized. And so I just can't
Wow.
use it.
Well,
It's
and there's
very
some
challenging.
curriculums that, for whatever reason, that season of life that I'm in, I just simply couldn't do it. I
Yeah,
could
sometimes
not bring out the
overwhelm.
stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know this is a solid curriculum. I know this is really good, but I just can't bring myself to do it with
Yeah.
you. Like, I
Yeah.
think that that's very important, the teacher relationship with it.
Yep. Yep. So teacher relationship, looking at the thoroughness of the curriculum. And then the third and very important thing too is what your child's relationship is with the curriculum, right? Like if they're screaming every time you pull it out, then there's probably some negative associations with it. And
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to probably move forward if that's kind of the relationship they have. And sometimes in a situation
Yeah.
like that, I might recommend or say, if it's working really well for you, one thing you can do is just use it as your guide and then take those lessons off the page and like present it in a different way to that child, right? Like there's always
Yeah.
ways to navigate all of these issues, but those are the things that I kind of look at. Curriculum really, and we always are reminded of this, it's a tool for us to use, and we can adjust it and build on it or take away from it or use it however we want. And it's just the bigger question is are these materials that we're using helping us move us to the goals that we have, right? Like, is it helping us move forward in all of the things that we're teaching, especially with math? So I think those are really important things to look at. Now, a lot of people have followed. Again, one of the reasons why this live was prompted was because we have been using Good and the Beautiful for since we started homeschooling 6 years ago for math. And so we've gone up through level 6. And this last year, we transitioned to Sapson. And I get questions all the time, like, well, why did you leave the Good and the Beautiful? And I'm like, there's everybody always thinks it's this big dramatic thing. And I'm like, there's nothing dramatic. It's just
Yeah.
that the Good and the Beautiful starts to level out after level 6. So we were looking, when we
Yeah.
were looking at math tracks, my girls were really solid in level 6. They were able to do like 90% of the curriculum independently. They loved it. They were solid. I felt like they knew what they were doing. They would do it independently in the morning, and then I would meet with them in the afternoon and go over anything that they needed help with. So I'm like, they were on the track, and I felt really good about them skipping over level 7. So then there's only level 8 left in the good and the beautiful, and that's considered their pre-algebra course. So at this point, like I said, this is kind of a pivotal moment. That's why I think it's important to talk about it, because we start looking at all these different paths and avenues. And I was kind of faced with the decision as well, do I have them do their level 8 pre-algebra course in it's their 7th grade year, or do we switch curriculums? And to me, logically, it just made sense to do a pre-algebra course that would feed into an algebra course, right? There's Good and Beautiful doesn't have an algebra course that is released, and they haven't said anything about releasing one yet. We don't have any information on that. So I kind of had to make a decision, and it was level 8 was brand new last year. So I just didn't know a lot about it or have heard anybody's experiences. So from the research I did, from moving from level 6, or if you're in a similar situation, if you know that your child needs more practice, for sure, just go on to level 7, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the obvious answer. If you feel like they're ready for pre-algebra, this is where I feel like, in hindsight, I actually wish that I had just gone to the Good and the Beautiful level 8, because I feel like it's a really solid course and it was working really well for us. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have a little bit regret with this, because I feel like I made the mistake, and this is probably, I kind of knew, and I wish that I had been a little bit better about this, but when I decided to move them into Saxon, for actually the same reasons that Shantel said, it's very close to the Good and the Beautiful and how the lessons are structured. They have like a lesson that you can read over, or there's videos that you can watch, and then you practice the math, right? But I feel
Just a
like
little
when we
more
did the
dry.
placement test, sorry, say that again.
Just a little more dry.
A little bit more dry. Absolutely. Yeah. When we did the placement test, this is where I think Saxon gets confusing. I actually went to Chantel to have her explain this. Is you can either, it's kind of like they have 2 pre-algebra courses that you can choose
Yeah.
from, Saxon 8-7 or Saxon 1-2. And Chantel explained this to me. So why don't you explain it to everybody how it works? Because you've used them both.
Oh, hopefully I can explain it well, but they're basically the same level. It's just 8-7 has more. It moves a little slower. It explains things a little deeper. It actually still has fact practice and a few hands-on manipulatives. I think maybe like the fraction circle thing in the beginning. Whereas algebra half moves just a little bit faster. There is no fact practice. Like it's just very much more built for that student who doesn't need that slower pace, I guess, is kind of how I would explain it, I think. Hopefully that's how I explained it to you.
No, that's exactly what you
You'll
said,
always
and that was
remember.
perfect. And when they did the placement test, they placed right on the border of those 2 courses. I really probably could have chosen. And from the research I had done, a lot of people, because again, remember, their Good and the Beautiful's pre-algebra course just came out last year. So people have been dealing with this for years. Like, what do I do after Good and the Beautiful? So I went in and researched and talked to lots of people. I talked to people on Instagram. I read in message boards. A lot of people either went into a pre-algebra course or into Saxon's Algebra 1 course. That was coming off of Good and the Beautiful level 6, some people just went right into Saxon Algebra 1. And I feel like I chose a gentler path, because I just looked at my girls and I'm like, we have so much time before high school graduation,
Yeah.
and I almost don't want to get you too advanced too quickly, because the problem is I'm like, I don't want you to have to be like taking SATs and ACT tests and not remember this stuff, because we did it so many years ago, like, because you're kind of on a higher math track, so it's
Yeah.
like, I don't really know what I want to do. So I chose to go with a gentler course, and the girls have told me they feel like they haven't learned very much this year, and I think it's just been too easy for them when it comes down to it. I feel like they were so used to kind of being a little bit more challenged. I like to call this like a healthy struggle. Anytime you're learning something new, right? We want our kids to kind of be at that place where they feel like they're confident, they're gaining confidence, because they're kind of doing hard things, but not so much that they're like in tears every day, right? Then there's probably a little bit too much. And so they'd been at a really healthy struggle with Good and the Beautiful for a lot of years. And then all of a sudden we were skipping. They're like, we know how to do this. We're going to skip this lesson. But then they couldn't quite do this lesson because they had skipped this. And then so we'd have to kind of go back. And so anyway, I just feel like I honestly wish we probably either would have gone into algebra half or maybe even to algebra 1, right? Or done the Good and the Beautiful. Actually, what I think I wish I would have done is done the Good and the Beautiful level 8 this year and then gone into algebra 1 with Saxon. That's probably in hindsight. Like I told people, I was like, if I have something I would have done differently, I think that's maybe what I would have done. But I feel like
I can see that.
with when I was talking to some of my other friends, those that had moved into algebra 1 with Saxon, I kind of want to point out Saxon was written 20 years ago, right? That was their updated version. And so we're kind of seeing a little bit probably more modernized standards when it comes to transitioning from Good and the Beautiful to Saxon. So a lot of my friends this last year have been using actually Good and the Beautiful level 8 to help them with algebra 1 and Saxon. So there's kind of been so much crossover between those two courses that there's kind of been some support there that we're seeing coming out. So that's just been my experience. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do going forward. A lot of people have been asking, and I'm just kind of going back to the drawing board. We've looked at in-person classes. We're absolutely considering staying with Saxon and just moving into the algebra 1 course this year, but I'm also going to be researching some other paths, and I don't know where we'll land up yet. I think anytime I go through curriculum, in fact, this is a good time to bring this up that Shantel and I put together. We just listed, if you go to Cathy Duffy reviews, she has all of the math from K through high school, K through 12 math. And she has reviews on all of them, and they're lists. And so when I select curriculum, this is what I do a lot of the times this time of year for all subjects, is I just go through and I feel like I try to use like a spiritual guidance, the spirit to guide me through this. But I just make a list of the ones that I want to research and say, do I feel like we need to go here now? And then I start taking notes. So we just went through that list and picked out, there are tons and tons of math curriculums on there. And so we just picked out like 20 of the most common ones that we hear. It's not necessarily ones we'd recommend or that we've used. It's just ones that have seemed to be a little bit more popular in the homeschool community. So if you're like newer and you're just coming into homeschool and this is your first year and you're doing you haven't, like, you're not familiar with these names of places, we kind of gave you some to start. Does that make sense? Kind of help you jump off of these and so that you can kind of take some notes. So that's what I'll be doing.
And I think it's good too, because like we were discussing Horizons math, and like it ends at algebra 1, and you thought you didn't realize that. And so some of these, it's kind of, you think they're high school, they have a high school, but they don't. So we kind of really tried to put the grade levels too of just the middle school and high school, so they kind of know where each one ends, because that can get tricky because you're not sure.
Right. Yep. For example, if I thought Horizons went through 12th grade and here I am in 8th grade, but they actually end with their algebra 1 course. So I'm like, it could be like 8th or 9th grade, right? I was like, I don't want to switch into a math curriculum that is at the very beginning just going to end in a year, right? Like we want to try to get them on a track that's going to help them finish through high school, right?
Right. Yeah. So we tried to be careful with that. But yeah.
Very good. Okay. I'm just like looking at my notes here. I have a bunch of questions that were asked on Instagram that I want to go over the last few minutes, but I think let's dive into that. Shantel, do you have anything else before we transition to questions?
I don't think so. Let's just see what questions they have. It might just open that up, okay. Whatever.
And if those of you are live here and you have questions or something that we weren't very clear on or that you want to talk a little bit more about, then let me know. One of the things that I did want to start right off with is there were a lot of questions on Shoreman math. And that's probably because both you and I, Shantel, talk on our feeds about Good and the Beautiful and Saxon, and there's mix with Saxon and Shoreman. So you don't have any experience using Shoreman, correct?
I don't. I looked into it with my oldest son, and I really don't remember why I chose not to use it. Probably, knowing me, because I can be a cheapskate to a flaw sometimes. Knowing me, it was probably just because I could reuse the Saxon books. But I don't have any experience actually using it.
Okay. I looked into Shoreman about 2 years ago. I think it's a great option. From what I understand, this is what I'm going to tell people because my memory is rough because it's been a couple of years. But I remember there's a video and it's found on his website. And if you go and you can't
Yeah,
find it, message me and I'll try to find it for you. But he explains his relation to Saxon and
yeah,
how he's broken off of it. From what I understand, he actually uses the lower levels, I think, to teach Saxon. And then in pre-algebra, he has integrated algebra and geometry. He's one that takes that integrated approach. So algebra and
yeah,
algebra 2 and geometry are all integrated, and it's basically it's online videos, and then he has, I think, his own practice problems for the higher levels. I'm not 100% sure, but it's on my list to actually go back and research for this year. Comes highly recommended. I know a lot of people
yeah.
that have had good
A lot
success
of,
with it, but there
yeah,
is some mix there with his relationship with Saxon and when Saxon was sold, why he didn't believe certain things. Like he kind of wanted to maintain how Saxon was originally taught, some of those methods and approaches. And so, and he also kind of brings in a biblical view when he teaches. And so that's
yeah,
kind of
that's
fun
right.
for some people. Yeah.
I think he also, in my vague memory, and he may have changed it because, like I said, I researched it with my oldest, who is 21 now, so I could have changed. I think his are shorter, so it's almost easier sometimes for homeschoolers to do because it's like 120 lessons maybe plus tests. I don't remember. That's just a number I'm throwing out. Whereas Saxon can sometimes be like 140 plus tests or more. So in my memory, it's a little shorter. It might be easier for some people to fit into their homeschool year. That's about all I remember.
Yeah. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Um, okay. And Shoreman's on our list of one to kind of look at. I was just scrolling through
Sure.
here the questions here because I wanted to ask if anybody's live here that has questions. Let's see. I think somebody says, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? That is not what I wanted to do. How do I get that off, guys? You guys get a show of me. Oh my gosh.
Don't
How do I
ask
not
me.
do
I
that?
don't know how to do
Guys,
it,
I
but
am not, this is not what I wanted." Oh, so funny. Okay, this is the terrible thing about lives. Let's see.
let's
Oh,
see. You
that's
asked
better.
me
Maybe
all.
if I'll come
Oh,
back. Nope.
oh, there we
It's because
go.
I was going through these questions. Okay. Sorry, guys. You could have just looked at my camera for a minute. I
That's okay.
probably put on some kind of filter. Anyway, okay, well, I'm going through these questions. Let me just read them. Um, is pre-algebra, yeah, really important? Absolutely. Kind of helps set the foundation. I think that there's
Yeah.
pre-algebra in level 6, Good and the Beautiful. That's why so many people can transition into Saxon 1, is there's a little bit of pre-algebra in it. And again, because it's just a little bit more to today's modern standards. So that's where, some people are kind of seeing some of that crossover.
Well, and I
Um,
think Saxon also reviews a lot. Like the first 40 to 50 lessons is a really strong review. So I think that's also why they can transition from level 6 to Saxon algebra is because of that. Those two things. Level 6 and the Good and the Beautiful has some pre-algebra concepts, and then Saxon algebra 1 reviews a ton.
Absolutely. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel level 5 with all the extra problems helped them foundational wise? I hear a lot of people complain about math level 5. Chantel, did you use Good and the Beautiful level 5?
I did, yeah. I don't think for my kids we we didn't always do all the problems because sometimes there was a little more than I felt was helpful. Because there's a point when there's so many, it's just frustrating. And then there's a point where there's not enough and they need more repetition. So I feel like it was kind of borderline for my kids, anyways, on some of it, not all of it. Um, but yeah, I think some kids need it. And then, yeah, I don't know. I think it just depends
Yeah,
on the kid.
our experience with level 5, it was a pretty challenging course to get through. I felt like it gave them a fantastic foundation, but we spent
Yes,
a lot of
for
time on
sure.
it. It was not a typical school year. We started in June because I heard it was a pretty challenging course, and we just did it a couple days a week during the summer. And then we ended in April, and we had been doing pretty consistently 5 days a week and splitting the lessons. So
Wow.
it just took us a long time to get through. But it should be noted that level 5 is being adjusted right now, and
Yeah.
Good and the Beautiful acknowledged there's a lot of problems to it. So they're going to condense the problems, and there's a
And
new
I
one
think
coming out
it's
this summer.
And I think it's so helpful that they're now coming out with a solutions manual for 5. I think that that's going to be so much more helpful because that was one of the problems that we had is that it wasn't worked out and I couldn't sometimes quite remember how to do it, and having a solutions manual would have helped. So it is really nice that they're coming out with that as well. Hopefully they will for the other levels too.
Absolutely. Yep. So good. All right. A couple of the other questions I had gotten on my Instagram that I wanted to talk about. Sorry, you guys are just going to see my avatar. I cannot figure out how to turn this off. I tried swiping different ways. It must have been, I was scrolling through the comments. So anyway, I apologize. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Um, are we testing to make sure your kids are on track at the end of the school year? Um, I have done one test with my kids. It was actually during Good and the Beautiful Math 5 because I was like, if I'm going to do all of this work, I want to make sure it's sticking. And it was. They tested phenomenally well, high above average, and it was worth it for me to keep going. Is kind of what I decided. Beyond that, I really personally, this is just my personal philosophy. I don't care much about testing, as I feel like pretty confident. I know where they're at. If I can keep moving toward curriculum and I see that they're understanding and I'm involved enough that I see that they're going, then that gives me the confidence that we're making forward progress, and I don't spend too much time on testing. Though I feel like if you wanted to look into, we used the Homeschool Boss test. Shantel, what have you done?
I have not done any testing other than my oldest two, who, when they're close to graduation, they do the SAT because that's just what our state does. That is the only testing that I have done. And so far, they've done really well on it. So as long as my kids are understanding it, it's just not something I've worried about. But I know some people have to, like in their states, and for some people, it's just a priority for them. It just wasn't for us.
Right, right. Very good. Yep. Other questions here on the live. Have either of you used Good and Beautiful Math 7 or pre-algebra? I didn't use 7. I talked a little bit about this. If you were late, you can go back and listen to it. But I would have liked to use pre-algebra this year. I probably it would have been a good option. I'm not even opposed to. We're going to see where we kind of end up at the end of the school year. I was like, I might even use it to supplement if I feel like they need it going into Algebra 1. We'll just kind of see where they're at here in the next couple months. We still have
Yeah.
a few months to work through. Did you guys use Good and the Beautiful Level 6? We did, yes. Chantel, have you ever used
We
it?
No, we didn't. My two kids who were using Math 5 just had some unique issues that the Good and the Beautiful just wasn't able to fit. And so we had to move on to a different program after Math 5. But I wish they could have used it because I liked it. I thought it was well done. It just didn't fit their learning needs at that time.
Yeah, my advice is this: if you've used Good and the Beautiful, keep going. Just keep going until it doesn't work anymore, right? Like that's where I kind
Exactly.
of wish I would have just probably done one more year because it was
And
working
in
so well.
fact, any math curriculum, if you're using something and it's working, I would just keep using it, even if a new one comes out and you want to try it. Just, you don't fix what's not broken.
Absolutely. Yep, that's totally what I think so too. A couple of other questions before that came in is paper math resource suggestions, because there are a lot that do like online videos and it's technology based, especially the middle and high school years. I know
Yeah,
Saxon is absolutely one that can be done all in the course book. You don't have to
for
use the
sure.
online ones. When I was browsing through things, I don't know much about Christian Light, but that looked more like a textbook based too. Chantel, have you seen, or what other ones have you noticed that are paper based?
Master Books, I believe, is paper based. They do have videos, but they're not. They made the book course. They actually bought many of their courses from other companies, like Jacobs Algebra or Harold's. Yeah, Harold or Jacobs, I can't remember. But they bought it from another company. It's actually been used for a very long time, so that's paper based. I believe you can use Matthew C. paper based. Because you could just get the teacher guide. You don't have to watch the video. Um, And that's all I can think of at the moment. I don't remember if there's any more. There probably, and then there's always beginning college textbooks. Like I know a lot of people like Lyle's, but sometimes it's hard to find.
All right. Nice. Let's see. I'm just looking through my questions. Any benefit to community college math courses in high school? Chantel, you talked a little bit about that. Anything you want to elaborate on how you did that?
I think I think there definitely is a benefit for community college math classes. I think one benefit would just be if your student wants to get college credit sooner. I think that is great. I also think that for some people, there's just not a lot of options. There's not a lot of tutoring options. There's not a lot of, they can't or don't want to send them to the high school. And community colleges are just a really great resource. I think overall we've just had a really good experience. I do think sometimes people worry about, and I don't know a lot about this, but my friend didn't want her kids to do community college classes because she wanted them to enter college as a freshman, and she was afraid if they got too many credits they wouldn't be able to do that. But I don't know. I haven't worried about that still, but I think that there are a lot of benefits to community college if your college here actually we don't have to pay for it. It's free as long as they're in high school. So
That's right.
that's
And
right.
here you're in New Mexico. I think I forgot to mention that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, we're in New Mexico.
Yeah, we
So
have programs like that in Utah. I haven't familiarized myself with them as well, but we have options. Absolutely. Like I have a niece who went right into a tech school. Also, like you talked about, she wasn't heavy on the math courses. She just studied enough to pass the placement test to get into the tech school. And then the tech school, she'll be able to get her high school diploma through it as well as have her tech certificate. She's going into graphic design. So definitely other options here where you can kind of look into that. Was that the case with your son with tech school? Because he he had to finish up through algebra two, or
no, he actually didn't. He was able to skip a few classes because he did well, but you know what, he applied for that on his own, so I actually don't know what he did.
right?
um, I will say one tricky thing with community college classes to be aware of is that their scope is very different than high school. So you need to, again, the maturity thing comes into place because it's a whole year of high school is done in one semester. So like the workload, we're talking the
Yeah, that's a
workload.
lot. Yep.
So you really need to make sure that your student is ready for that. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing
Mm-hmm.
is they use a completely different scope. So my boys actually went down a level and it was a breeze for them because they didn't quite know which level they were supposed to be in. Even with the placement test, it just wasn't super precise. So,
I figured it out. It's like I
oh,
saw
there you
this little
go.
smiley. I was like, oh, I bet it's that button I accidentally clicked.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
great.
that's
Yeah,
something to
great
keep in
knowledge on
mind
that. Yeah, yeah. Again, lots of different paths, right, that we can choose and
for
kind of
sure.
pull from. Yep. Okay, last question, unless anybody else has on the lives. What do you recommend for students that are about to start pre-algebra, of somebody that has dyscalculia? Dyscalculia is like almost kind of like a dyslexic, if I understand it correctly. I don't have any kids with it, so I don't have hands-on experience, but kind of like they might see numbers backwards or mix up operations. It can be
Yeah.
difficult for them to memorize like multiplication facts and stuff. I don't have a lot of good advice other than, and I'm sure this is not going to help this mom because I bet she's already going to know this, is that in those kind of situations, I mean, really abstract concepts are really hard to grasp. And so anytime you can be using
Yeah.
hands-on manipulatives is going to be really good, like base 10 blocks, things that they can touch and move and manipulate, which is, I would imagine, really hard in the older years. Do you have any suggestions, Chantel?
I think I have a son who he has low working memory, which is not dyscalculia, but he has a hard time remembering some things. And the things that I have noticed with him is he just needs a lot of review with it. And so I think picking something that has the hands on, I think that you got that right, but then also moves at a very slow pace. I
Ooh,
have heard a
yeah, that's
lot of
good.
I've heard
Gentler.
a lot of kids do really well with Matthew C who
Okay.
have
That would make
dyscalculia.
sense. That would make sense.
And
They have more, that's more of a mastery based, and they have
yes,
some hands-on components, I know.
yes, but they have a lot of review. Something I actually bought a couple of books for this particular son to try out for next year. It has a lot of review. It has actually 3 full review pages of previous concepts, and then it has 3 pages just on the new lesson. And
Okay.
so I think that that could be, I've heard that that is a really good option for that. Um, but that's about the only suggestion I have. I'm sorry.
No, I love that. I think that that will be good. I know a lot of people that have transitioned off of Good and the Beautiful rave about Denison as
Oh,
also a
that's
gentler
true.
curriculum.
I,
So I know that that can also be really helpful. That might be one to look into. I've researched it a little bit, but not as much as some of the others. But I do know it's a
yeah.
little gentler, moves a little bit slower to help those, especially for those that have maybe had a poor relationship with math in the past.
For sure, and that is a good one. We have used 1 year of that, and
Okay,
I
yeah.
think that that could be a good option as well, just depending. And I think sometimes when you have kids with things like this, you do the best you can. And then my son's occupational therapist just recently told me, she's like, you might just have to realize he's never going to be able to do this and move on. Give
Right.
him a calculator, give him this and move on because he's never going to get it. And it was a little hurtful.
Yeah, that
Not
is hard
because
to
it was
hear.
rude,
Yeah.
but because it was like, oh, really? Like there's no way to fix it? But
I always feel like in
yeah,
those situations, when we've had challenges too, the one of the best things to do is just like, I'm doing everything I possibly can, right? You're not being a lazy mom at it. I'm going to professionals, I'm seeking help, I'm looking for options and exhausting my resources. And you are
yeah,
doing something, right? You're doing everything you possibly can to help a child move or grow when you have some of those challenges. So yeah, it can be really challenging to work through. So
yeah, yeah. Just know you're doing your best.
all right, great. Any other last questions? We're using teaching textbooks now for 6th grade. What do you recommend we do for next school year? Teaching textbooks goes through level 12. I don't know
I think
exactly.
it goes into calculus. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would
If
keep
it's
going.
working, just stick
If it's
with it.
working, keep going. That's
Yep.
what I would say is if it's been on a good track, no need to be swapping around unless, like I said, maybe one of those 3 things where you have your relationship with your child or the relationship of the child with the curriculum or your relationship with the curriculum or the thoroughness, you feel like it's just not working for them. Maybe they're not grasping concepts or something. A lot of times too with math, I say, well, like if you feel like your child's not working with that curriculum, grasping the concepts, you can also supplement. Sometimes kids
Yeah,
just
for
need more
sure.
practice on a certain concept that switching curriculums isn't necessarily the answer. It's
Mm-mm.
spending and slowing down and spending more time on a certain foundation. Maybe it's fractions or something or
Yeah,
decimals
for sure.
that you need to master but kind of before you kind of move on to the next lesson or kind of keep moving
Yeah.
forward.
And sometimes it's
And
just sitting on that lesson for a month. Maybe they
yeah,
just need to sit there for a while. Yeah, I think you just try to work with it before you switch if possible.
yep, absolutely. All right, great. Thanks, guys, for being here. If you came in late, like I said, I will have a couple of options for you guys just to comment when I post. We'll have this. This will be great, especially if you're newer to homeschool
Hmm.
and need some suggestions of things to start researching. This list that Shantel and I will be put together. I'll send you the link for the math track visual
For
that you
sure,
can
it's a good one.
study, as well as the link for Cathy Duffy reviews. So thanks for being here, guys, and
Yes.
hopefully this will help give you guys some answers and directions and clarity of where you go next.
Yes, and thanks for inviting me, Cassie. This
Yeah,
was
thanks,
fun.
Chantel, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
All right, we'll see
Okay,
you
we'll
guys
see you guys
later.
later.
Bye.